who are viewing on live stream. So I hope that all of our students and staff had a great start to the school year despite the wet weather, and that everyone is safe and sound after the storm. I would like to thank our administration, our faculty, and our staff who worked tirelessly this summer to help us prepare to welcome our students back in person yesterday. So we just now had the privilege of meeting our new staff prior to this meeting, and I just wanted to take a moment again to say welcome to Croton-Harmon. We are so excited to have you here. Then speaking of back to school, I wanted to take the opportunity to remind families that back to school nights at each of our schools will be virtual this year. So the meeting links will be sent out via email, but please save the following dates for your calendars. So the CET back to school nights will be September 14th for grades 1 and 2 at 6:30 p.m. For grades 3 and 4, it will be September 20th at 6:30 p.m. And for kindergarten, it will be September 21st at 6:30 p.m. At PVC, the 5th and 6th grade back to school night will be September 13th, and the 7th and 8th back to school night will be September 22nd, and those will be at 6:15. And then our last back to school night will be at the high school, and that will be on September 29th at 6:30 p.m. Okay? And then lastly, I would really just like to highlight for the community that this afternoon we sent out a special edition of Croton Connections that talks about the equity work that's ongoing in the district. So please check it out. In it, you will see that the district will be hosting an event continuing the equity conversation on September 9th, 2021 at 6 p.m. outside in front of the high school. This is an opportunity for our community to review and provide feedback on the recommendations made by the district's equity stakeholder team this past June. Input from all attendees will be accepted and considered by the board when we review and discuss those recommendations at our September 28th work session. I would like to thank the equity stakeholder team for their work over the last year, and I would encourage everyone in the community to participate in this forum. Your voice matters, and we really want to hear from you. And that concludes my President's report. Thank you. And now we will move on to hearing of the public. So we do not have anyone with us in the audience this evening. So now we will move on to our Superintendent's report. Dr. O'Connell.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and I too will welcome everyone. Welcome to the 2021-2022 school year. We've had 2 phenomenal superintendent conference days this week with our faculty and staff, and then, as we all know, we welcomed our students back to school. We also welcomed Storm Ida to school, or Ida, I don't know if we're calling her Ida or Ida, to school today. So when we were with our staff, I shared a quote, and I'd like to start the evening in my report tonight with that quote. And the quote is by Roy T. Bennett, author of The Light in the Heart, and I used it to frame my opening comments to our staff. And it says, "Life is about accepting the challenges along the way, choosing to keep moving forward, and savoring the journey." And we spent a lot of time talking about how we chose to keep moving forward and how we always choose and find ways to savor the journey. So that reminds me that we are a system that is poised to challenge our students to become critical thinkers through problem solving. We do this together by strengthening partnerships with our students, parents, local community, and global communities. And as we start our school year off with the Board of Education, I'd like to thank you for your continued support. So my superintendent report, I'd first like to talk about the opening of school. It is wonderful to see our students back in school. I did ask our principals to just send me a little something that I could share with the board about their first 2 days. So I'll start with the high school. We've had a great first 2 days at CHHS with 97% attendance on Monday and 99% attendance on Tuesday. Our protocols ran smoothly and students fell back into their familiar routines easily, including being pleased to get back to their regular bell schedule and having their single days again, where students go to all of their classes in one day. Our students continue to be mindful and respectful of our health and safety protocols, and our staff is incredible in supporting these protocols. She went on to say our first day included time in the morning where our freshmen and their big buddies came at about 7:50 and shared breakfast together, followed by a school tour and time to meet each of their teachers and go to their classrooms before the rest of the school came in and around 10. Our freshmen had another opportunity to connect and have lunch with their big buddies that day as well. The time was valuable to allow our class of 2025 to get familiar with their building and connect with their big buddies, who they have been meeting since last year to support their transition. Their hallways are bustling. They had a great energetic 2 days, and they're looking forward to their September homecoming week. From CET, the first 2 days at CET were very exciting. Despite the rain yesterday, our students in grades 1 through 4 joined in the celebration and welcomed our kindergartners to CET for the first time. I hope you had a chance to see the tweet of that with the little ones coming through a parade of children. Health and safety protocols have been reviewed and reinforced. We had students take advantage of our outdoor picnic option for lunch today. Students are learning their routines of school and are busy spending time getting to know each other and their teachers. Attendance has been very good. At PVC school opening day was filled with a great deal of energy and a bit of celebrity. So I don't know if you had a chance to see the journal news. Students arrived to find huge balloon arch and gathered with their friends. The sound of the children's voices and the laughter overshadowed the rain. PVC was also part of the LOHUD report about the first day of schools in the region. The opening of the middle school was as exciting as the PVC staff enthusiastically welcomed the students back and got them engaged in their learning and reacclimating to the school. Students and staff did not allow the rain to dampen their moods or joyous occasion of starting the new school year together. So a little snippet from our 3 principals on their first days of school. I will tell you, all I could see was students clamoring to get into the building to see their friends, and the excitement was certainly palpable. Now on to some business parts of my superintendent report. As you know, we had meetings which we talked about our opening of school protocols, procedures, etc. In the presentation to the board as well as the community, we talked about how we were going to communicate our positive cases. We will make a slight adjustment to that when we return after the first few days that we're off. So that week is it the 9th. So if you recall, our process was that we were going to report once a week in the principal's letters the number of COVID cases in the building. It was a process we had in place last year, and it worked very well for us. The administrative team has been meeting to discuss that, given the sensitivity of the Delta variant right now and concern over the Delta variant. When we come back, the September 9th week, what we'll start is, if there's a case in a school, the principal will communicate the positive case to that school community. So, for example, if there's a case at CET would, Mrs. Bianchi would send out a K-12 alert sometimes at the end of the day that we've had a positive case. If there's a case at PVC, Mr. Plotkin would send it out to the PVC community to let them know we had a positive case, and the same thing at the high school. Mrs. Duback would send out, sometime, I'm not going to say it's going to come out at 3:01, but sometime after the day, they would communicate if they had a positive case. And only if there's a positive case. They're not going to send something out if there were no cases. Then, as a team, we decided then weekly, Mr. Griffiths as the district COVID coordinator, along with the COVID coordinators, will give a summary of the week, so that if you're, you don't have a child in one school, that you would get sort of the big picture of Croton. So we got together and thought that through, and again, given the sensitivity of where we are now with the Delta variant, we thought we would put that measure in place to give people some peace of mind. So that will start when we come back the 9th. Tomorrow I've asked the principals to just report like they've been, like we've said, just in their principal weekly letter. So again, in summary, even though we wrote that in our opening plan of what we were planning to do, and we're adjusting that slightly. If there's a positive case in the school, the principal will communicate that to their school community daily if needed. If it's not, if there are no cases, it will not be reported. And Mr. Griffiths with the COVID coordinators will give a weekly summary on Friday then, so people can get an appreciation of the district. What's very, very important is that we follow the work we're doing with the Department of Health in contact tracing and alerting people to cases. It's not a shout out from the mountaintops. It's keeping that information, which is medical information, close to the people that need to know. So it's very important that we remain true, as we were last year, to our processes and protocols protecting information. So my next piece is about COVID screening testing. Before I have John talk about what I've been talking about over the last few meetings, about this great opportunity that we have to do gateway testing, etc., I just want to put that on hold for a minute and then talk about what came out today. Okay? So, what came out from the Department of Health today was a commissioner's determination on COVID testing pursuant to 10 NYCRR 2.62. In this memo that we received today, it says, after careful review and consideration of the above referenced CDC recommendations for COVID-19 testing, effective immediately and as long as this determination remains in effect, all P through 12 schools are hereby required to implement testing consistent with the following. And it goes into some detail. Talks about teachers and staff. This determination applies to all P through 12 public and non-public school districts, faculty and staff, including all teachers, substitute teachers, student teachers, school administrators, paraprofessional staff, support staff, including bus drivers. This determination also applies to contractors working in a P through 12 school, public or non-public, or school setting, including contracted bus drivers. Then it goes on to say, and I'll jump right down to the one piece, that says the testing requirement for teachers and staff. P through 12 schools are required to ensure teachers and staff, as outlined above, have testing performed for COVID-19 at least once a week when school is in a geographic area identified by the CDC as having a low, moderate, substantial, or high-risk transmission rates. Teachers and staff may be permitted to opt out of mandatory weekly screening testing if they provide documentation of being fully vaccinated against COVID-19, as set forth in. So there's more detail. I'm not going to read the entire memo that came out, again, from the New York State Department of Health, Commissioner Howard Zucker, and our new governor, Kathy Hochul. So it says effective immediately. So our COVID coordinator team and nurses, etc., will continue our discussion because we have been discussing this process with our unions prior to this coming out, and we'll begin to put our process in place. I will say, in my opening address a few weeks ago, I did say and share the April data of vaccination right here in Croton-Harmon, and it was in the 80s. We did say we were going to resurvey staff, and we did resurvey our staff, and we have 94.6% of our staff is vaccinated. So with that said, this is why I said I was saying to John earlier, I said I really want to try very hard to not confuse what I just read with the very exciting partnership we have with the Department of Health, which I'm going to ask John to speak about next, but I'll just lay the groundwork. They're two separate things. This is a mandate, and we will make sure, as all mandates, we will meet that mandate. And the other piece that he's going to talk about, this great opportunity, as we know, we want to engage in a mitigation strategy that will hopefully capture positive COVID cases so that we can remove them from the general population so they can get well and we stop that spread. And as we know, this can be in vaccinated and unvaccinated. So the work that we want to do with the Department of Health that's critical is to get as many people involved in this as possible. As many students, faculty, staff, vaccinated, unvaccinated, so that we can get a really good sense of Croton-Harmon, our data. So I'll pause there for a minute and ask John Griffiths to give us a little bit more information about the exciting partnership we have with the Department of Health.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connell. And because it's something we really do want to emphasize, we do have some visuals that we'd like to provide to the board and to our community. Really, the first and foremost, to sort of reemphasize what Dr. O'Connell stated, we're so happy to have partnership with Westchester County. We know that the task that the county had to go through to coordinate with federal CARES funding to find appropriate partners through private laboratories to be able to do testing in every single school district in Westchester County was a large lift. We were told that we would be informed about which lab we were partnered with. Since our last meeting, we did receive that information. It is a, if you could go back one, just quickly, that's okay. It is a firm out of Syracuse that we've already started to have some correspondence with, Quadrant Biosciences. Initial impressions, very, very impressed with the materials that they're providing, very impressed with the way they have allocated staff human resources to different functions and the kind of interactions we're already having with the company. The testing program, really just to reemphasize, has two different layers to it. The way it is designed, there is an initial testing that we are calling our gateway testing. This is, as Dr. O'Connell said, we want to have as many students, teachers, and staff to be part of that initial testing. We have been given a date on or about Tuesday, September 14th as the date for that gateway testing. And then basically then the next phase of the program is weekly testing, where we're going to try to test as much as 20% of our population. To make sure that everybody is getting the information that is needed, we do have a communications campaign that is already launched. We had been waiting for Westchester County to go through all the logistical tasks that I was mentioned to get things up and running. We finally did get word this past Monday, our initial communications regarding that. That was in the form of a lot of materials, inclusive of an introductory letter and a paper consent form. I think we got that around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And by 5 o'clock in the evening, we had taken those initial materials, transferred the introductory letter into a K-12 alert, taken the paper consent form, transferred it to an electronic form, and sent it out to our community. So we didn't waste a moment on this past Monday. As Dr. O'Connell mentioned this week, she was also engaged in personal conversations with union leaders, just really reemphasizing what this program is all about and why it's so important that we have as many people as possible participating. Today I had the opportunity to communicate to all of our staff, sending them a reminder about this program and the importance to fill out the consent form. We had also just received the registration information from Quadrant that is necessary for anybody who's being tested to be part of an electronic system. That electronic system will then be used to track samples as they're collected and report results back to users in a timely fashion. A similar reminder is going to be sent out once the hustle and bustles of the first few days have gone by. We have a K-12 that's in the queue, ready to be sent out at 12 noon this coming Sunday. That once again is a reminder and sends information out for our families to also register for the quadrant portal. And then we will have a final reminder for all right before the weekend, where, before the next week where we'll begin our testing on Friday the 9th. Just to do a quick overview of the testing program, the way that it will be worked is we will get confirmed schedules. The dates are selected by Westchester County, so we're waiting for confirmation. Once those dates are set, we will establish testing locations at each of the schools. There will be times throughout the day where we will have people coming down. They can handle about the processing about 150 samples an hour. So with 550 or so people in the school, we will have to figure out how to schedule that so that there's a workable flow in to get tested. The nice thing about working with Quadrant is we've already heard a lot about how they're going to be managing the testings, the staff that they provide, the technology, the scanners that they bring, so that when there is a sample, it is scanned in, it matches up to the software that they have, so that everything in terms of data is managed and reported accurately. Once again, it is saliva-based testing. No spitting required. It's a swab on the inside of the cheek, 10 wipes on one side, 10 wipes on another. It goes in a vial with a solution. That's done on site. The students are able to, or staff members are able to self-administer it. And then results are sent back to the user through the electronic portal within a matter of days. Just a quick mention of who should participate, and that's basically everyone. Regardless of vaccination status, we would really like the N of how many people are involved in this testing as high as possible, because obviously that has the biggest impact in terms of, as Dr. O'Connell said, understanding what our data is all about. Why should we participate? Why should we volunteer? First of all, it's quick, it's easy, it's PCR based, so it's highly effective in terms of figuring out if there is anybody who's pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic inside of our buildings. If we have as many people as possible participating, we know we're going to do as good of a job as we can stopping the spread of this virus. And if we are able to stop the spread, we're able to keep each other safe. If we're able to stop the spread, we're able to keep our schools open. And then just lastly, wanted to just show the community, show the board exactly what is implied when we're talking about self-administered saliva tests. So Tracy, I would ask if you could just click on that image and then maximize the video. You could get an idea. Bottom right in the black next to the V. No, in the actual frame.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. That's okay. And then if you just could hit play for us.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Is there volume?
I believe so.
All right.
But it's not urgent. Yeah. So you see the student has almost looks like a toothbrush, 10 times of the gum on one side and then on the other. They twist off the cap, they turn it upside down and put it back into the vial. They shake it 10 times. And that's it. That's what we wanted to share. It's a very simple procedure.
So again, these two things, and then I see Neil, I just saw your hand up. So these two pieces are, what I shared, talking mandates, and very important. This piece is about let's try to get our whole community, our whole learning community together. And we talk about a lot of things like what's in our control and things along those lines when sometimes things seem out of control, right? And that was one piece that just kept resonating with me. This is like one step we all can do together to, keep our schools, in the know on what our percentages are and being able to, again, be in control to manage that. So thank you, John, for sharing that. Neil, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, thank you. John, I know you had prepared this presentation, but I think Dr. O'Connell mentioned that this afternoon a word came down from the state, which we received from the School Board Association this afternoon, probably at the point at which you probably didn't have any electricity in the district office. And what I note is that it says that the state is saying that we have to offer screening testing to students, parental consent for minors, on a weekly basis for all unvaccinated students. That's in addition to the mandatory weekly testing of unvaccinated staff members, as we talked about, or staff members can opt out. And also talks about the schools must have the capacity, either on-site or via referral, to provide diagnostic testing for anyone who is symptomatic or has had exposure to someone with COVID, even though asymptomatic. And I guess you probably don't have the answer yet, but that seems to change what you just talked about to the point of how, having 20% of the school population, particularly below high school age, whether below the age of 12, tested, is really not going to conform to what now Dr. Zucker has said in the state. So I guess without, you're not going to have the answer now, but I am presuming that we are going to now, or you're now going to go back to Quadrant and go back to County DOH and say, all right, how do we accommodate this?
You are right, Neil.
Okay.
That piece, which came in section 4 of the new memo that came out, as part of it in section 4, we do need to continue that level of dialogue with our partners and at the county to make sense of that. And if, depending on what their response is it more tests coming in? Does it mean they have to, what they're sharing with us, perhaps? And what their other recommendations will be. But you're right, we all received it probably around the same time, and making sense of it. And we'll take that piece on with the DOH.
So I appreciate that. The other thing that I would suggest, because things may change and evolve, but I think we really need to get out to our community, our school community, everyone in the school community, as soon as we can have something in a written form, exactly what the protocols are, including the protocol for return to school. Because the return to school, as I've read this, is something which is not a rapid test such as we have here, but is a PCR test, which they're going to have to go to an appropriate medical provider to get. And I think everything should be laid out there in one place, and everybody have it, because I know there's been some comments in the community. What are you doing about it? What are we doing about testing? What are we doing about, if somebody's test positive, how are we communicating? As we talked about before, I'd like, everything to be there as comprehensive and as quickly as we can, so people are informed and not upset.
So in the past year, obviously, those protocols have changed quite a lot, and it's has been our job to really monitor those changes and immediately discuss those changes throughout the system so that they're addressed and complied with properly. Just wanted to make sure that Dr. O'Connell noted that there is a difference between what was presented by me just right now and what came out this afternoon. And one of the things that I don't want to get confused is that one of the important aspects of the state program, or the Westchester County program that I just outlined, is that It's really an encouraged activity for everybody regardless of vaccination status. One of the things that we're very, very aware of right now is that people with who have obtained vaccinations can get the Delta variant, they can be infected, they can infect others. So whereas the mandate today is talking about those people who are not vaccinated being subject to testing, the important thing I'd like to re-stress is that this county program is something we're asking everybody to volunteer for, whether vaccinated or not, because we know that having that sampling of everybody is also extremely important to safeguard the well-being of our schools.
And the other thing to add to that, Neil, is when we first, joined our thinking with the county, we had to provide the county our total number of students, our total number of staff, so that they are preparing on their level for the size of Croton or whatever other district they're working with. So they already know our numbers and they're preparing things accordingly. And the other piece I would stress is we're not new to the testing business. This is a different test that we're using, but our COVID coordinators, run and headed by John, had our testing program, a pretty vibrant testing program starting in January of last year. So we have, our processes and protocols, our communications, our what happens if, scenarios laid out. And I understand this is a new company, but our COVID coordinator team has a good sense of, flow, as well as when somebody is coming back to school. Those protocols are also very much ironed out and communicated when we're dealing with that. Now, there's one piece before I forget, and then I may have seen another hand. Yes. Is I still have not received the contract, so I don't know if that's been playing around in the board's head. Today I had email exchange with somebody from Quadrant because I thought maybe the contract was coming from them when I wasn't receiving it from the DOH. But I do believe we are getting the contract from DOH and not Quadrant. So they tell me, it's in the mail now, they tell me it's coming, and I understand the magnitude of the work they're doing in the county level. So again, they're telling us they want to come around the 14th. I still don't have the contract, so I most likely will be coming to the board officers to say, do I have some of you available for an approval of a contract? So I just wanted to keep that placeholder in your head. I wish I could give you, I tried. I said, the board is meeting on the, can you help little Croton out? But yeah, they're not ready for that yet. So, Anna?
Thank you, Dr. I was going to ask about the contract, so thank you for addressing that. But I also wanted to just add, if maybe in your materials and in your preparation, you couldn't do some sort of registration clinic for the testing, because I did have the opportunity this afternoon to get onto the website after John Griffith's email came out, and I just wonder if that might be an impediment to some people to register for the portal to get the results, or if it might be a deterrent for people not registering.
Anna,
I'm sorry.
You know it was me because I turned mine on.
I'm just thinking of some of the families in our community that maybe might be challenged by that level of interaction. Or
okay.
I mean, I know it took me a while to figure out the Link system, so.
Yeah. That's a good piece. I'll circle that because we're meeting with our team tomorrow. So I did too go on to and I registered myself today just to get the flavor of that. Not a bad idea. It wasn't as intuitive in some areas as, I thought.
It was finicky. It didn't like dashes for phone numbers.
Yeah.
It was things like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would hate for somebody to get frustrated and just not register.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I've highlighted that and we'll bring that up tomorrow, John, with our COVID coordinator team. Thank you, Anna. Go ahead, Nina.
Thank you. Dr. O'Connell, you said that next week you'll be modifying the process to alert the community daily at the building level if there's a positive case.
Yeah.
Can you speak to whether the district considered the same at the class level?
We are still reviewing that with council, and I think I've communicated to the board, a COVID diagnosis is medical information that should be and must be kept confidential. Moreover, pursuant to Public Law 2181, all contact tracing information shall be kept confidential by any contact tracer, contact tracing entity, or designated non-governmental entity, and may not be disclosed except as necessary to carry out contact tracing for permitted purpose. So we started to review that with council. We'll continue to review that with council. We want to be, as I mentioned, very protective of that medical information. When you start drilling down, you do, run that risk of exposure. But at this point, we feel very comfortable with saying, like we did last year, although it'll come out from a building level, communicate when there is a positive case, and we'll continue to discuss with legal counsel if the ways to go further if that would be possible. So the only thing I can agree to is that I'll continue that level of dialogue. As always, I always encourage families to be discussing things with their own medical professionals too, as they see best. But I'll continue that dialogue with legal counsel to explore if that could be a possibility. Now, I will also say there's a huge difference between elementary school and middle and high school, because in middle and high school, students are all over the place. So they're not just in one classroom. So you really don't see really the feasibility of that level of reporting as students get older. But I do recognize that, our youngest learners are in the same room with the same folks all day. So I understand the concern and respect the concern for anybody that is listening. I fully understand. We just have to make sure that, we're doing that in the right way, and if that is actually a possibility.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Those were very thoughtful questions. I appreciate that. It'll certainly help us with our continued dialogue. But go testing. That's all I want to say. I think it's a great opportunity, a great mitigation strategy for us. We speak as a district about mitigation layers, and this is a good layer for all of us to be a part of. So, with that said, I'm going to change gears a little bit. Oh God, that was kind of funny, because I asked Denise to give us an update. I know, get funnier, right? Give us an update on electric buses.
Oh, gears.
Get it? I know, it's bad when you have to explain it.
Is that okay? Good evening. I'd like to give a little update on our electric vehicle funding. So about 5 or 6 months ago, the district submitted a comprehensive 3-vehicle grant application to NYSERDA for electric vehicles through CMAQ funding and Volkswagen funding. At that time, the criteria for funding was quite stringent and a bit of a stretch for us in such a small community, but there was discussion that they might loosen some of the requirements. So we moved forward with our grant applications despite some concern about our eligibility. And we have been in that process for about the last 5 months, going back and forth with additional requests for information from NYSERDA. I'd just like to briefly kind of oversimplify the requirements just so that you can understand the structure of the grant. Essentially, it comes down to 3 components. A yearly mileage requirement, which is over a 5-year period, bus scrappage requirement, and a disadvantaged community component. Now, these criteria are designed specifically to have the greatest carbon reduction impact, right? So they want to reduce as much carbon as possible through the awarding of these grants, which is why it is very difficult for such a small community such as ours to achieve these stringent guidelines and requirements. So mileage. So the buses need to travel at least 8,000 miles per year for 5 years. Each year for 5 years. Here in Croton, our buses travel between 3,000 and 4,000 miles a year. So 8,000 is a very difficult target. But again, we hope that there was going to be some leniency with that. So this grant came through a truck voucher program, which was geared towards heavy truck vehicles and transit vehicles. And the school bus component was kind of an add-on. So we thought, since the truck voucher program, the truck was a 5,000 mileage requirement, that they had spoken about possibly easing up on that 8,000, bringing it down to 5, which we thought through creative routing that we could achieve. The second requirement is the bus scrappage requirement, which is that you must scrap a vehicle that is 2009 or older. The vehicle has to be in operation, or it is not eligible. If it's off the road, there's no eligibility. It has to be an on-the-road vehicle, not one that is out of service. There are not a lot of 2009 and older diesel vehicles available because of the lifespan of the chassis, etc. And then the third is the disadvantaged community component, which provides additional funding. So if you recall from our propositions, the district's application included 3 vehicles. A 66-passenger vehicle. So in looking at our application now with no leniency in the mileage requirement, we do not anticipate that application moving forward. I have reached out to numerous people to see if we could possibly encourage our executive, Latimer, or our senators, or some sort of advocacy to stand behind us. We have this strong Mothers Out Front component and Croton 100, and I was told that a lot of the requirement in this area is a federal mandate, so it is not very likely that without a change in those federal mandates and legislation that would be possible. The 30-passenger vehicle, we are very excited to say that we believe that we can meet this requirement. So we have a run that is, of course, the only runs that would ever be able to meet these requirements because of our small size are our out-of-district transports. So our students who are attending either special education schools or private and parochial schools outside of the district. So we do have a route that meets this requirement. We also have a scrappage vehicle. So the scrappage vehicle has to be on the road, 2009 or older, and diesel. We do have that vehicle. So we are hopeful that we will achieve funding for that vehicle. And then the third vehicle was a second 30-passenger electric bus. Now, initially, when the grant came out, the approved vehicles were provided to NYSERDA by various manufacturers. So NYSERDA went to the manufacturers. They provided a list of comparable vehicles. So comparable to an electric 30-passenger bus are these 5 vehicles, etc. On that vehicle list was a comparable 2009 gas vehicle. on the master list. Our scrappage was a gas bus. Since that time, that vehicle was pulled from the master list. So they are no longer considering a gas vehicle. It is diesel only. So we are, concerned about the eligibility for that application. So again, at this point, we have no firm response from NYSERDA, and we will update the board and the community as soon as that information becomes available, and then at that point, we will make a decision how we will proceed.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, as I recall, when we worked last spring on these propositions that were put before the voters, we included the 66-passenger bus, even though at that point in time we did not foresee a need to take a 66-passenger bus off the road. Am I recollection correct?
Partially. So the 66-passenger scrappage bus
Yes.
that we were assigning to this is still on the roads and operating, and we hope that it will continue to operate for the next year or so. We did need a 66-passenger bus for sure, because we held off the year before.
Okay. All right, but as it is, the two smaller buses, 30 passengers, as I recall our discussions, were more critical, and that will bring the question, I'm assuming at some point, if we cannot get two electric vehicles, I'm assuming we do for the first 30 passenger bus, but we can't use in the scrappage of a gas bus, we will have to discuss what do we do. And, whether it's lease or purchase a fossil fuel vehicle or what. So I know we're not, it sounds like you're not ready to come to the board with a recommendation yet, but I guess we're going to be seeing that relatively soon.
We believe so, yes.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. I'm still going strong here. Thank you, Denise. I'd also like to take this opportunity to bring you back to the Athletic Study Committee report that was presented to the board in on May 19th, I believe, 2021. And as always, we take a look at our reports, we look at recommendations, etc. And I would like to share with the board some of the pieces that have already been put in place. Now, I know DJ had a meeting with the athletic committee, I believe it was this week, and where he had an opportunity himself to go through the athletic study report. So again, last year, as the board knows, we put an interim in place so that an interim athletic director, so that we could really concentrate on program. We formed the study committee, and they were off and running and did a great job. So I'd like to just highlight some of the pieces that came from the report that have already been put in place. First and foremost, Mr. Galino led the work of the Athletic Study Council, and the council came up with these recommendations. Mr. Galino still is working with us, with DJ, and that's kind of exciting because this report is almost like a roadmap for DJ as he's come into the district. So one of the first recommendations was about hiring a director of health, wellness, PE, and athletics. and that this new director have clear alignment with the district's philosophy for education-based athletics. So I think very excited, to have somebody like DJ Bowman with us, really as our new director, with a philosophy that does align with Croton-Harmon beliefs. It was very important that there be a broad representation of stakeholders on the interview committee, and I think we've achieved that as well. To review job responsibilities and do not place the new director in a chairperson role on some of those high leverage committees like the Health and Safety Committee or the Wellness Committee, etc. And we do not have the director of health, wellness, physical education, and athletics in a chairperson's role. Provide a new mentor, to the new director. The board has hired Mr. Galino to help continue to support DJ as he transitions to his new role. Offer professional development on systems and other opportunities. As the board knows, one of the first actions you took after hiring DJ was to support him in some of his professional development activities. And that also means learning systems such as Tandem and Family ID, etc. And that support will be ongoing. One of the major, which I considered major because it went to culture as well as physical space. One of the recommendations that was in the report was to look at the physical space here at the high school for athletics. So what we've done is move where the director of health, wellness, physical education, and athletics, we moved his office to a different area. And by doing that, it gives him privacy to conduct the important business that he is doing, but it's also connected to a space so that he can conduct meetings. And our visiting coaches, our outside coaches, would have a space in place to go and congregate and be and have meetings, etc. So we've redesigned the space down here at the high school, not redesigned it, but moved things around so as to accommodate some of those pieces. And I say it goes to culture because of that coaching ability to have connections and feel like they have a place and feel like there's a place for meetings and important meetings to be conducted, etc. So that was a piece. As the board knows, we created event supervisor positions. We have one for each season, and that season's meaning the fall, winter, and spring. So another one of the recommendations already put in place. Provide training to the athletic secretary. As you know, we have a new secretary in that area, and we will continue to support the person as well as DJ in our quest to continue to grow that department. Continue the discussions about branding. For those that was hearing from our staff as they were walking down to Spencer Field when we had our opening day, they were commenting on the foreprints that you can follow all the way down to the field. That was a Choose project, which went to continuing the branding, and those discussions will be certainly ongoing. And I'm going to transition back to Denise now, because one of the recommendations that were also in the study was about creating an RFP for architectural athletic design firms that we can conduct a feasibility study for turf and the Spencer Sports Complex. Just dropping that name, and just like with the staff, I keep referring to it as the football stadium. It's about having, big dreams and thoughts of what the future could be. But I know we have movement on the feasibility work and the RFP associated with that. So I'd like to transition back to Denise. If you could give us an update on where we are with that.
Sure. So we have been working on a comprehensive RFP for about the last 4 or 5 months, Paul and I, and we actually have on the agenda this evening a recommendation to work with Paul Vosberg. Paul was a part of our construction management firm through Barone Construction. He was on site in the district for about 3 years. He knows our district very well. He is a seasoned professional architect, engineering background. He actually assisted in the last 2 years of our submissions to SED and refining a lot of the details in our documents, which resulted in a reduction in our change orders compared to prior years. So he is a wonderful resource and will be working hopefully with us on the remainder of this project. So it is an RFP, request for proposal, for architectural and engineering services. Within that RFP, we have an athletic turf field component. It will consist of a feasibility and environmental impact study for turf field at Spencer. It will provide cost estimates for various components of the project. We'll look at location, feasibility, schematic design, address potential issues or conflicts, look at the topography, soil, drainage, testing, all of that. Some of the components that we expect to include in this will be access to the field, parking, security. This is going to be a very expensive resource to the district, so we want to make sure that there's safety there. Bleachers, lighting, egress, etc. We want to have our wish list items somewhat incremental because we don't want to make the this portion of the RFP so large that it actually gets ahead of the feasibility study, because we don't want to cost out things that are going to that may not make it past the feasibility study. So we have to do it in a somewhat layered approach. Also, some of the other aspects of the RFP will include our 5-year plan and building condition survey, reviewing that. Also, air conditioning at CET Elementary School that we built into our ARP funding, our CRISA funding. Also, we have district-wide stormwater design and drainage plan that we will need to address. And then there is also a sustainability component that we are contemplating adding in, which would look at enhancing what we've done through our energy performance contract, such things as electrical charging stations, solar, possibly geothermal heat pumps. That is a massive area, quite a costly area. So we are getting some more guidance on whether or not we want to include that, but we definitely do want to include some sort of sustainability component. We're going to retain the right to move forward with one architect and engineer, or break it out into components depending upon their expertise, recommendations, etc. We're also working very closely with Keenan Bean, our attorneys, on that, on designing it so that we have that flexibility. Our preliminary timeline is we expect to issue the RFP in early October with a November response date. It will take quite some time to evaluate these proposals, but at that point we will bring back either our recommendations or potential contracts to the board and move forward at that point. We are expecting that the cost of this will be, so generally architectural and engineering services are about 10 to 15% of the total cost of the project. If it's a $2 million project, that would be about $300,000 for those services. The feasibility portion is generally about 15 to 20% of that, so that could be anywhere between 45 and 75,000 for that. Possibly looking at a July 22 vote, if the board so chooses, and that would either be through a potential bond issuance or a capital reserve designation. Questions?
Yeah, just so I understand, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit. On the agenda tonight, and I was going to ask this later, but I can ask now, is a proposal to engage Mr. Vosberg to, in essence, review, advise, and help, I guess, frame the RFP for issuance or distribution to potential bidders.
Correct.
Right, so the actual RFP as prepared by your office with his consultative services then will go out for bidders to in essence come up with plans, and I'm trying to absorb everything you said, plans for the various components, athletic and otherwise, right, heating, ventilation, charging stations, etc., everything.
Paving, yeah.
Everything which in essence would be what we might have done in the past after we went through that 5-year building condition survey process and then identified our priorities. And I kind of got that right as to what this process is, as distinguished perhaps from what the board had done back in 2015 in terms of steps.
Yes, very close to that. They are not going to create the 5-year plan necessarily. We are going to put it out. We've asked, at least in the preliminary documents, we have a review because we are not up for a 5-year plan until 2024. However, that is a very long time. Remember, around COVID, we were extended, so we really should be up for a 5-year plan now. But they pushed it out until 2024. So we are going to look at the recommendations, and then after we receive those recommendations, then at that point make a decision on how far we want to go with those recommendations.
Okay, and when? Because
exactly.
we might decide that all right, we need to do we want to do the athletic complex immediately, but we don't really need to do the water retention issues for 2 years. Much as a discussion we had after the 5-year building condition survey back in 2015, same kind of prioritization.
Correct.
Okay. And is there any, it sounds like the time frame does not allow for a decision to be put before the voters in May of 2022.
No, I see that as a possibility.
Because you had said July.
Oh, did I say July?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That was in
Okay.
May.
So the plan is to if we can do that work or have our, get all that done, to be able to have something in place by March for presentation to the voters in May. March or early April.
And that is in laying it out with Paul, with the Pauls, I call them. That is a very, very, very aggressive timeline.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it is, but once you lay out all of the moving parts, it is an aggressive timeline. That's what we will shoot for. As we have in the past, we have voted for capital reserves off budget schedule, but we're to shoot for potentially May, if possible.
Okay, and that would mean, in essence, if we had voter approval, and I'm just thinking down the road, then you go to design work, you go to SED, and would we possibly be able to actually start doing the work, given that time frame, in the summer of 2023?
Yes, that is feasible.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to make sure I completely understand this, because I'm a little confused because we haven't done the new building, the new
BCS, building condition survey.
the condition survey. So basically what we're saying is that we're going to carve off this portion of work for potentially athletic facilities and a few other things that, but then come back after that, potentially the next year or year after, to do the full building condition survey and a separate capital plan for those things. The next capital plan, because we're going to be running out of our current capital plan, right?
That could be the direction. As Neil said, we could say, okay, so the 5-year building condition survey is comprehensive. It's district-wide, involves roofing, paving, then the stormwater component. So we may say, we have the plans for the turf field. That is something that we can fly solo on, move forward with that, and then, yes, do the BCS and the other components at that point. If we go with one A&E that is full service and feels that they could take the whole project on at the same time, then we can do it that way. I don't expect that it will all be necessarily under a capital bond authorization, because we do have capital reserves.
Right.
And that's a different process.
So in the past, we've always chosen, there are some things that we've done out of reserves and some things that we've done as a capital plan with its own separate bonding. What I'm trying to get at is that because it's been a while since we've had a building condition survey, right? And there were items in the previous capital plan that we did not chose not to prioritize. We said these are things there were things that we were told at that time, you don't need to worry about it right now, but you might want to look at it in the next one. Right. It's probably time we start looking at those things.
And that is a component of the RFP. We have it with all of the backup documentation. We have our previous building condition survey, the items that were addressed, the items that remain. So there's a lot around the BCS.
Okay, so we're essentially still going off of the previous BCS.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're going off of that, and we're going to look at items that we can pull off of that BCS, plus some of the items that may come out of athletic, right? And carve that off as essentially a mini capital plan for that we can do now. Perhaps some of it out of fund balance, perhaps some of it out of bonding, we'll see, right? And then, but then the next year there may be things that we come back at and look at again for a longer term, or perhaps 2 years later, right?
Partially. The only thing I would say is that I don't feel that we should pull out too much of the BCS. I think that should be looked at as one project. Of course, if there are smaller, urgent issues that we need to address, that maybe we can bundle that in with the turf field. But I see the turf field and the BCS and the stormwater all separate, though they may be bundled together. I don't see separating the BCS into different components, unless the timing it says that that's the way to proceed.
Right. The point that I'm trying to get at is, and what I want to make sure that I understand is, what is our timeline for going back and reevaluating, because it has been so long since the BCS. And what was the date of the BCS?
15.
Yeah.
15. So that's more than we're talking about 6 years ago now,
Right,
right? It's about time for a new one.
right, right.
And I want to make sure that we're not falling behind on critical capital investment that we need to do to maintain the usability of our facilities.
The BCS is the largest component of the RFP.
Right.
So the answer to that is no, we are not. That is a high priority.
So that would be, so a building condition survey would be part of this RFP?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I just, I'm not sure, and I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but is everyone aware of what the new board members, what the BCS is, how that process works with the school district, and what the changes have been in that area?
Is that a 5-year plan?
Yes. Previously, the law was that every 5 years, the school board was required to look at all of your facilities from top to bottom to determine whether or not there were any needs that needed to be addressed and to give it a timeline. The law then changed, I want to say, we did ours in 2015, and then it changed in like 28 years ago, 2019, and they said, we're going to push it out and you don't have to do one for 8-9 years now. So that's why now
9 years from 15.
from your last one. So that's why there's now a 2024 date for when the district will be required to look at its entire system, soup to nuts, and make a plan, a 5-year plan for how you're going to address any issues you have. So what Denise is stating now is we're going to have an RFP process. She's going to incorporate into that. And I don't mean to speak for you, but I just wanted to, there were a lot of terms being thrown around. I thought it was a bit,
And we feel we can't wait.
yeah,
And that's basically the reason. We can't wait.
yeah. So we're going to add BCS with the athletic, and we're going to put some of that stuff in now to take a look at, so that we don't let our, so we can plan properly. So that's, I just want to make sure everybody was on the same page.
Thank you, Iris, and you reminded me of why they pushed that out, because the legislation around the BCS is linked to state aid. So they pushed it out for everyone so that they could be relieved of that state aid portion. So though we're going to be moving forward with it, we may have to forego the state aid because we have a 2024 date. But what we can do is we can renew it in 2024.
But Iris, what you said was, and thank you for that explanation, you said it would be bundled with the RFP to get pricing, but that it could be prioritized separately from the feasibility and the...
Correct. So that's what Denise will do. They'll present to us. We'll all dig in and look and see, are there things we need to move around? Is it feasible? Does it make sense financially? And is something about to... Nothing. I don't think we're in any kind of critical state.
Great.
You did look down this way quickly, though, you said.
Denise, I'm sorry, at the end you said that if it's renewed in 2024, we're then eligible to apply for the state aid at that point? So we would just be expending it, but then it would be reimbursed?
No, I don't think they'll look at it that way. I think that if we wanted to renew it in 2024, we could get the state aid on it. So let's say, for example, a building condition survey costs $45,000, let's say. We can have ours possibly updated and then just receive the state aid on that updated portion.
So, a couple of things. First, when you're talking about the state aid, if I understand correctly from what you just said, you're talking about state aid for the cost of doing a building condition survey.
Yeah.
Not the cost of the actual work.
Correct. It's the building condition survey, not the actual building aid for the capital project.
So now, as far as the building aid for the capital project, was there a greater percentage of building aid provided for projects that were done as a result of a building condition survey being completed by a district? Or if our building aid is 31%, or whatever it is, If we do this work next year and it costs $1 million, we'll get, down the road, 31% back. If we do it in 2024, or however the BCS process, we will get 31%.
Correct.
Assuming our number doesn't change. The only difference is that if we spend $50,000 to do a BCS in next year, we won't get any aid for that work.
Right.
Of doing the analysis, not the actual construction.
Exactly.
Okay. So the other question that I have, and as you are, we're going through this right now, is I'd like to know in your administration's recommendation how the various construction projects that we will be doing and the borrowing for those projects, assuming we have voter approval, will fit with the management of our debt service over time. And for new board members, as we've talked about a lot on this board, we try to have level debt service so that we don't have spikes and dips in taxes. So, all of this process, because part of what we're going to think about is if we have to borrow, we want to do this project, but we borrow the money now, well, that can have an effect on our tax cap, can have an effect on our tax rate, and so we may wait a year so that we've dropped off some debt so we can add some debt. So just as you present, everything down the road, I think we should understand that as a community as well.
Yeah, our debt schedule is going to drive our timing for this, for sure.
Denise, are you aware, does the legislation have around the funding for BCS, does it have a look-back period? Are you aware they have one where you're allowed to incur costs prior to 2024 by 6 months, 8 months, 12 months? That maybe we can look into to see if that's something we can possibly qualify.
I am not aware of that. If you have information on that, I'd love for you to share it with me, but I am not aware of that. Generally, aid is around commissioner approval dates and maximum cost allowance, the other projects that we've had in the building and in the district, but that look back I'm not familiar with.
It could not apply in this case, but I just...
Are you talking about dormitory funding? By any chance?
No, I'm familiar of it from the dormitory project, but I'm looking at it in this capacity specifically.
Okay. I will look into it. Thank you.
So I'll jump in to wrap up my report. Thank you, excuse me, for indulging me and my team to address a lot of pieces that we've been anxious to share with the board. I think my final statement would be we thank committees. I mean, look at the work from this one committee, and this is just one committee. Your thinking helps frame our thinking, helps serve as a catalyst for our conversations and planning. And I just want to say thank you. We can see from the Athletic Study Committee so many things that are in motion. And thanks very much to all of the folks that serve on our committees that help us move ahead with our thinking. And that concludes my superintendent's report for the first one for this school year.
Thank you very much, Dr. O'Connell. We will now move into ongoing business and recommended action that the Board of Education approves the resolution confirming revised apportionment Appendix A of 2021-2022 school/library tax levy as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, we'll now move into 3.2. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the 2021-2022 advisory committees as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
So I have a question. So, I'm not sure if everyone recalls, but this was on our August, agenda, August 5th business meeting. And at the time, and now I know it's in the, you click on it and you see all the committees, but at the time it had listed a ton of committees that are in the district. And my question was, I wasn't sure why these were being placed on the agenda, since it didn't seem to me that these were board committees, with the exception of the health, safety, welfare, that one. And so we've never approved these before, and so I wasn't quite certain as to the need to do a approval of a district committee at this time.
I believe it did come to us as a thought that they should be board approved. And I thought it was a board level discussion at that time that it should be approved each and every year. Personally, it is not my recommendation that they be approved, but as always, since we were engaged in dialogue, we bring it forward so that we can hear varying sides of it. So I believe that is the genesis. It became a discussion on this level that perhaps committees should be approved. So we brought it forward. But again, my recommendation would be only the ones that come out of policy or that are in regulation or commissioner's regulations, that I do not believe the others need board approval. And I think we've gone so many years without them being board approved also.
I think also, if I could add, because they're district committees, there's oftentimes, additional solicitation of participation and participation that changes throughout the year based on community members or staff that is maybe starting on one thing and then moved into something else. And so if we decided to sort of take the view that they were a committee that the board should be appointing every year, every time there was a change then in the makeup of that committee, it would have to then come before the board again. Neil?
Yeah, this goes back really to board policy. Board policy 2260, Citizen Advisory Committees, which gives the board the authority to establish, in its discretion, citizen advisory committees of representative residents of the district to meet with the board to provide advice and reaction about matters. And committees are appointed and discharged by board resolution. Resolutions shall state the purpose of those, the scope of the work of the committee. And then people are assigned, and that committee is then, according to policy, is going to will be discharged at the end of its service. So, as I read that policy, if we were to say, for example, we as a board would like to establish a committee to discuss with us and to give us reaction and advice about the Spencer complex. And we say, we're going to appoint that committee, we name the people, we say, go forth, do your analysis, give us a report, thank you very much, you are now discharged. Those are board committees, okay? Committees that, as I see it, and I know I've had a lot of discussion with Iris about this because it's a confusing area, committees that are established by the administration for purposes of meeting, assisting the administration in developing proposals, policies, etc., or guidance, is not our committee. Okay? And at first I wasn't looking at that way, and Iris and I have discussed, and I'm in agreement with what I'm saying now, which I had not been before. There are some committees that we do establish policy 2250 says board committees will be members of the board. And we do that, communications, advocacy, etc. That's not what we're talking about. And there are some committees that we are required to establish that could have non-board members, such as an audit committee, where we would be allowed to use community members who are not board members on the audit committee, such as the Health and Safety Committee, which is required by law. So what the sense that I have, that unless the committees we are talking about, and this resolution discusses the establishment of, so the committees that are listed are Athletic Advisory, who we spoke about previously, which was created by the administration, Culture Respect Task Force, Environmental Sustainability, Equity Stakeholder, Guidance and School Counseling Advisory, Health and Safety Committee, and the Steering Committee, which oversees various health and safety wellness initiatives, Social and Emotional Learning Committee, all of which are, and Wellness and Nutrition, all of which provide valuable service, but I don't think the impetus or the genesis is the board. There is one other that we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about policy, but my sense is, and we put it up for a resolution, my sense is that this is really not something that we should be voting on, but rather only those committees that the board establishes, either because we are required to, or because we want to as a citizen advisory committee, would be subject to a board resolution and board appointment. So that's kind of how I see it, and I don't know if others have a different thought about that, but I'm dealing with sort of basic policy and what I understand our role is as opposed to administration's role.
So, with that in mind, I'd like to move to amend this resolution to instead read that the Board of Education approves the 2021-2022 Health and Safety Committee.
We already did that.
We already did that.
Yeah.
We did that at the reorg.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I withdraw my I withdraw my motion.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on?
I mean, I have a question as a new board member. My understanding is that the president put together the agenda, correct? Is that? So why is this on the agenda if this is not a board function?
So we had, as I said, it had come up before, past, and Neil had a sort of a different view on that initially, in whether that was a board function or, whether it was something the board should be approving. And we hadn't in past. So we put it on the agenda for the August 5th meeting. But sort of since, at that time, then there were some, looking at it again and thinking about it again, and maybe was sort of too quick to put it onto the agenda, so we tabled it from August 5th. I wasn't at that meeting, so. And then this was just, we had put it on the agenda, we need to now decide to, we basically, it's, at this point is where we've come down to that we had time to discuss it and discuss sort of some of the shifting thoughts on it, so.
And so just to sort of reiterate what Dr. O'Connell was saying also, and what Sarah's saying, the board officers, we do put the agenda together, but if a board member says, this is something I want to bring up at the board meeting, we put it on the agenda. It wouldn't be fair for us to just say, oh no, we're not going to have it as a point of discussion. So since it was raised by a board member, it was placed on the agenda for discussion, and so that's why it's on the agenda tonight.
I mean, my takeaway from this is, based on Dr. O'Connell's representation. This is not our role to approve these. But to your point, Sarah, if we were approving them, I don't think that we would be approving individual members. We would be approving just the committee itself. So you wouldn't need to amend it.
Well, that's actually like the Health and Safety Committee is a good example. So Health and Safety Committee is a committee that the board appoints every year. And so the members of the Health and Safety Committee are appointed at our reorganization meeting every year. And they need to be appointed at that meeting. So
members of the board or members
the
of
members of the entire members
of the entire committee. Okay.
Yeah.
But if I could add, going back to a board committee, a citizen advisory committee, if these were citizen advisory committees under our policy, then we appoint the members of our citizen advisory committee. The problem is, and I'm probably the one who's guilty of having thrown this whole mess in the first place, based on my initial thought about it, is that these are not board committees, and so we're not appointing them. We don't even have to define the committee. You know, we have, you know, if the administration decided they wanted a committee to talk about parties for the staff, you know, they could do that. And we, you know, we wouldn't have any part to that. We wouldn't vote on it. We wouldn't approve it. And we wouldn't choose the members. But we got into this because I think I was probably too hasty to think we ought to be having these approved. And in point of fact, since they're not our committees, I've changed my mind and I don't think we need to.
Can I ask a procedural question? Or do you want the other question?
I was gonna, go ahead with your procedural question.
So it sounds like this is a committee that was formed by the administration to guide the administration. They're thinking the board doesn't need to approve this. It is on the agenda. Are we? We have to vote on it, right? Okay. So we vote to say.
No, we have to vote on it. Can we?
That was a recommended action.
We have a motion to strike it from the agenda?
Yeah, we could do that, or we could, I was gonna say.
Rather than voting it down.
Right. I was gonna suggest, I move to amend, now I really am going to move to amend, to amend the resolution. I'm gonna amend the recommended action to suggest that the Board of Education acknowledges and thanks the members of the 2021-2022 advisory committees for their future participation.
We don't vote on it. Why don't we just recommended action at the Board of Education, delete 3.2?
Well, I don't, no, you can table it.
Well, no, we were tabling because we were just striking from the agenda.
Okay, that's fine, strike it.
That's
That's procedural, that's not
Right way to do
regular.
this, that is.
Fine.
Yeah. Because if we table it, we have to come back to it.
So it's,
So, can we amend the agenda to remove 3.2 from the agenda?
My point is, I do want, I want to thank these members of the public who are taking their time to participate in our committees. Now, we make sure that's clear. Even though we are not voting to officially approve their memberships.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We absolutely thank all of our community members who volunteer on the various committees we have in the district. So Iris moved that action, and do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Neil second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, so now we are moving on to new business. So 4.1 is a policy for first reading. Recommended action that the Board of Education conduct a first reading of policy 8410, student transportation revision. And upon the unanimous vote of all members present, the Board of Education waives the second reading of policy 8410, student transportation revision, pursuant to policy 2410, and adopts policy 8410, student transportation revision.
So moved.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you missed.
Did I?
Yeah, you missed
sorry,
4.1.
did I skip over one?
Yeah, 4.1.
All right, what is it?
Sorry. Oh. Yep. So 4.1, I'm sorry, is just the first reading on policy 9700, professional learning. It cuts off on me. So we don't have an action to take here. This is just a first reading. But Neil, did you want to give us a brief synopsis on?
Sure.
policy 9700.
A brief synopsis is that policy 9700 is recommended by NISBA. We had a policy 9280 on the subject of professional staff development that had not been revised since 1994. Subsequent to that time, the Commissioner of Education issued regulations regarding requirements for professional staff professional learning, and for staff, administrators, teachers, etc., which is in the provisions of which are incorporated in the policy as recommended by NISBA, which is in this document before you. One of the things that it calls for, the regulations, is for the establishment of a professional learning team which will help the administration in coming up with a professional learning plan that we adopt each year in June, I think it is, which has been sent to, and that is the guiding principles and plan for how our staff will be receive professional learning in various components and what we will provide. That part is a requirement. That committee is a requirement. Important fact, the Commissioner's regulation, not supported by regulation, is very specific about what that committee is supposed to do, when it's supposed to meet, who's supposed to be on it, and it's the proposed policy, and this is a review with council, does not repeat in hoc verba the requirements of the regulations, because we are focused on, results, not process. So the policy does say, in accordance with the regulations, we will establish a professional learning team to review and revise, which we actually do through the administration, and when our plan is completed, it gets submitted to the Commissioner on Education. So that's how the policy is structured, why, and the process by which we have it. If everyone has any questions, comments, concerns, it'll be on for second reading in a month, and we've got an opportunity to bring them to the policy committee, and we can review them.
Thank you very much, Dan.
So that, the one that I had previously jumped ahead to, we are now on policy we are now on item 4.2, which is a policy for first reading and waiver of second reading. So again, recommended action that the Board of Education conduct a first reading of policy 8410, student transportation revision, and upon the unanimous vote of all members present, the Board of Education waives the second reading of policy 8410, student transportation revision, pursuant to policy 2410, and adopts policy 8410, student transportation revision.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
On the question?
Very simply, the state education law permits school districts to provide transportation from for students in grades K to 8 from school to a before school to school from a before school child care location, and from school to after school child care location, if those locations are located within the district. We provide busing before school, after school, to Happy Hearts. We have a universal pre-K program, and we also have other preschool programs that are going to be, actually not universal pre-K, I misspoke, that we will bring students from their before school program to the schools. Our policy does not specifically authorize that, even though the law does. So we're starting the school year, we should have this in place. The one thing that I will say, I see a typo on this, on the third line of the policy where it says in grades K-8, from school to school from a before school childcare location. When this was prepared, those first words from school should have been deleted, so I don't think we need to revise, but we need to correct the error. And the other thing that is included in there is as required by law, or as permitted by law, and consistent with the district code of conduct, a student who engages in disruptive or improper conduct while on a school bus may have the right to student transportation suspended, which is already in our code of conduct, but worth repeating.
Anna, your question?
Does that need to be amended to include our new universal pre-K?
No, because we're not transporting those students to school. Okay. You raise another question, which is not covered by the laws, I don't know, but we can check on that, is, and maybe I can ask the administration, are we providing transportation to those students who will be in universal pre-K programs?
No. So do you mean, are we providing pre-K transportation?
From home to Happy Hearts
No.
for the 4-year-olds?
No.
Okay. So if we were, and if that was something that we needed to have in policy, we would, but we're not doing that. So that's it with that, correcting the typo.
All in favor?
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Alright, now we'll move on to 4.3. Recommended action. Resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the 2021-2022 building use waiver fee for Croton Caring, and be it further resolved that the use of the district's facilities are subject to any and all federal, state, and or local laws and or regulations related to the reopening of schools, and the use and or reopening of school facilities during the COVID-19 pandemic, which may result in the denial, rescission, and or modification of any facilities use requests.
Before we move it, I think there's a typo here. I think it should be approves the building use fee waiver, not a waiver fee.
Correct.
You're correct.
And with that, I will move it as corrected.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah.
Who seconded?
Neil.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We will now move on to 4.4. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agreement for services between the Croton-Harmon Union Free School District and Happy Hearts on the Hudson, Inc. for universal pre-K services for the period of September 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
So harking back to the discussion about the policy, one of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about with this is transportation. If this is a program that's designed for students who might otherwise not be able to attend a pre-K program because of financial situation, and that's why I understand that there's no test for that. It's a general lottery, but one of the whole ideas of universal pre-K is to make pre-K programs available to people who might not otherwise afford them, and that's why it's funded by the government. And I wonder whether there may be an issue with some of these folks being able to actually get transportation for their kids to get to the program, and maybe something that I don't know whether this is something that is doable, and whether such transportation would be aidable. But I think it might be something that we might want to review for discussion at a future board meeting.
On that, I would just ask them perhaps, those not gonna be in the contract with Happy Hearts, but with the grant funding, rules that we receive, you know, that we get the money from the federal grant for doing this program. Is there a provision for, providing transportation to students?
No.
So basically, if we were to provide transportation, that would not be out of any of the money that we get from the feds. We would be taking on that responsibility out of our own budget. And of course, the next question is a legal question, whether we would even be permitted under education law to provide that transportation, which I don't know. It's a question worth asking.
Mary, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. So I was not clear at the last meeting that there wasn't preference given to families that may classify as economically disadvantaged, so that was something new that I learned since the last meeting, and that so there can be preference given for enrollment, and the selection process must be completely random via a lottery. Is that lottery still happening tomorrow?
Yeah.
That is, okay. We also know just from our own district's disaggregated data that that's reported to the state that this population also does have lower graduation rates than other groups. And so we know that this type of program greatly benefits children who might not otherwise be enrolled in a private pre-K program. So given all that, I was thinking about what you said as far as the process has gone very quickly this summer, because I know they didn't put out the grant application, I believe it was, right, till the end of July. So that the process had to move very, very quickly in order to get kids in seats, you know, starting in a couple of days. But with our district's focus on equity, I tried to put on my equity lens. And it got me wondering just whether we've given ample time for this population in particular to get their kids on this lottery list. I know we only had this week. Sounds like it's only from 10 to 1. I don't know if this has changed, where families could go in and put their child on the list. I'm just wondering if that's really provided ample time, as well as varied outreach methods to maybe these particular families. So again, there would be preference for them, but to make sure that any family with a child who has a 4-year-old who isn't planning on enrolling them in a private pre-K does have that opportunity to at least get their kid on the list. And if there's anything our district could do to ensure that we give ample time and enough outreach before we do that lottery.
I just have a question. Do we know how many registrants we have right now? And do we run the lottery, or is that run by Happy Hearts?
The lottery is
Can you turn on your mic, Denise?
Oh, okay.
It's really hard hearing you down here.
Sure. So I have to be honest, I was not very involved in this part of the process, but Happy Hearts the lottery is running through Happy Hearts, and that is, tomorrow. We have 36 spots. My guesstimate is that we may not even meet those 36 spots, which would open up opportunity for families who hear possibly later in the school year. I know that Karen Gatto has reached out to multiple preschool agencies, all of them within the area. It went out through a K-12 alert. It has been on our website. Happy Hearts has been promoting it. So I do think that there was ample outreach, though in a condensed amount of time.
Was there a actual mandate in the grant that enabled this to actually say that we must do the lottery at this time?
There wasn't a time specification. We were just working on trying to maximize the school year to have the lottery coincide with the beginning of the school year. so that we could maximize the benefit for those families.
Because the grant does mandate that it has to be a 180-day program.
I see. So there essentially is a deadline because it's a 180-day program, so there's effectively it sort of backs you into a deadline.
Yes.
Too many mics on.
Wasn't it up to a 180-day program?
I'm sorry, I can double check. My understanding was that it was a 180-day program.
180 day, every day under 180 days you get penalized for. In our conversations with the state, they said one thing you can count on is you will never receive full funding.
So when you say penalized, you mean we wouldn't get funding for those days, but
we would not be reimbursed for those days. And many districts, many districts did not take advantage of the funding just because of the compressed time frame and the inability to handle the administration component of it. And also because most of the districts that are running the pre-K program are having to absorb the loss in grant monies through the general fund. They are supplementing a large portion of the pre-K program through the general fund because of the funding mechanism at the state and the fact that you never really receive the full funding amount.
So Denise, I'm sorry, but just to your point, if we don't have the full enrollment, then do we not receive the full funding?
Correct.
So we basically receive X dollars per day per student. So the fewer students we have enrolled, the less money we receive. And at the same point, we have, the more students we have or able to recruit, the better we are. And of course, we have a contract here with Happy Hearts. That's what we're being asked to approve. And they're getting a certain amount of money out of that funding, and they still have to hire staff and maintain facilities as if there would be 36. So, the more we penalize them because of fewer numbers or fewer days, the less likely they are going to want to take on this burden, which may be why other childcare and preschool entities didn't even want to talk about it. So I think my sense is that yes, there's some problems with the way this is rolled out, but to provide the opportunity for those who have expressed an interest and to do further recruitment if there's slots, I think is a good thing to do for this year. And come next year, if there is funding or there's a change in the program, we will be better suited to put it into effect in a better way. But I wouldn't walk away from it.
I have another question about the contract, which I just noticed. There's a clause in. I don't know what's doing it, but there's a clause here that says in the section on the payment schedule that says that specifies an amount of $4,860 per year for each child the agency educates. So it's a per child. The agency educates for a full day under the New York State Department of Education UPK grant to the school district. Under no circumstance shall payment exceed 50% of the school district's UPK grant. Does that mean that there's no way that we can actually use the whole grant since we've only got one contractee? I apologize for not sending this earlier. I didn't notice it until just this moment. It's at the top of
page 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, are you familiar with that language? I'm not quite sure what that means.
was presented to, this was reviewed by Keenan Dean. No, I'm actually not sure what that means. And it,
Yeah, go ahead.
Because when I read that, I didn't know. I believe this makes it.
What I think it means is that if we get a grant for $10,000 times 36 students, $360,000. Okay? We will pay $4,860 for each of those 36 students. And the remainder of that grant is going to the district for its work. If we have a grant that is for $20,000, so that, or $18,000 to make it easy, so that for each student, right, it would be whatever the calculation is that we don't have to pay more than 50% of the total pot of money that comes to us from the federal grant to the agency. So it's not, so if we don't get as much money, they're still gonna get 50% max of what we get from the feds. So that they may get less than $4,860 if in fact our grant is not enough, to allow them to get 50%.
What service are we providing? What are we doing with that additional 50% of the grant? If this is a program that we're not providing transportation, we're not providing meals, all this is provided, all the instruction, everything is provided by Happy Hearts, yeah?
well, with the exception of the coordination, there's a...
Except of coordination.
Yeah.
But is coordination 50% of the total grant value? Coordination couldn't possibly be that much.
Right.
Well, but I guess our question is in that regard, John, and perhaps you or Denise know, what is the total grant funding that we're receiving?
You do know that, the total grant number.
Pardon me?
What's the total amount of the grant?
The grant is $194,400. It's a little over $5,000 per student. The reduction is the coordination component. So there's a requirement in the grant that says 10% of the grant needs to be attributed towards interagency coordination.
10%, right. Because 194,400 divided by 36 is 5,400.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Right.
And so
Happy
then
Hearts
you
is
got
the
49, you two can't provide it, right?
Right.
Right, but what Josh is asking, what that language is,
Right.
does that mean in fact that if it's $5,400 per student, under no circumstances shall payment exceed 50% of the school district's grant? That would mean
We can only give them 2,700 per student. Actually, less if we take out the, well, you have 2,700. 2,700.
However, the question now is, since this is language that was, well, I guess say, who prepared this contract?
I was not involved in it. Keenan Dean, I'm not sure who reviewed it with Karen.
I think
But
it's
I'm
Susan
reaching,
Vines.
I'm reaching out to them now.
Right, because the question really is in that regard, if this is a statement, if this sentence, under no circumstance shall payment exceed, if that somehow is a statement that is within the grant specifications, and that's why it's been included, that's why it's been included.
Right.
And if the agency has reviewed this and the agency is in agreement, the agency is bound by those terms. If that is not something that is required, and we say, well, I don't quite understand why it's there, and we don't have to have that sentence there, then we have a different issue. Question being, of course, I can't imagine that something like that would have been put in if it was not in the grant language, because why would you put that in?
The other question, I suppose this could be read to mean that payment for any individual student would not exceed 50%.
Well,
That's
$194,000.
I'm twisting myself into a pretzel.
You are,
to that reading.
So,
So,
We know that this particular contract was worked on with Karen and Keenan Bean, I believe Sue Fine. We would need to get clarity on that so that we don't continue on with this. I think there is merit to some of the things you said. It's probably in maybe the template language that is required. But let us find that out. Denise is trying to see if we can get some clarity now while we're still in session, but if not, we're not going to be able to, have you act on it.
So, I will, given our discussion, I'd like to move to table item 4.4. I mean, if we find out the answer before we leave tonight, we can put it back on, or we'll have to deal with it in the next meeting, or perhaps even have a special meeting to, to deal with it.
yeah.
So my motion is to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
did you have?
No, I just wanted to summarize though, especially if there are still seats available, it would be great as a district to really try and make a push, to make sure that every 4-year-old that's in our district that isn't going to be going to pre-K this year is aware of the program, is encouraged to attend, and, it'd be nice to find out any roadblocks that are preventing them so that by next year's kindergarten enrollment, perhaps our whole kindergarten enrollment, could have gone to pre-K beforehand, and that would give them really good kindergarten readiness moving forward.
Thank you very much.
With that, we will then move on to 4.5. Recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Croton-Harmon Union Free School District hereby authorizes and approves the stipulation of settlement together with all terms therein, resolving due process impartial hearing reporting system case number 539994, and be it further resolved that the Superintendent of Schools is hereby authorized and empowered to execute the stipulation of settlement resolving due process impartial hearing reporting system case number 539994, and the Superintendent of Schools is further authorized to take all actions necessary to effectuate the terms of the stipulation of settlement.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain?
Omar, you abstain?
Were you
No,
abstaining?
no.
No?
This is the one we're
This is-
saying.
Sorry?
This is the one we're
I'm saying, sorry.
Okay. All right, and now we'll move on to 4.6. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the special education recommendation number 24658 as presented.
So moved.
Can I get a second? Iris?
second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain?
Same.
Abstain? Motion carries. And now we'll move on to 4.7. Recommended action, resolved that the Board of Education of the Croton-Harmon Union Free School District hereby authorizes retaining Paul Vosberg, Architect Construction Manager, to provide consulting services related to the 2021 Architectural and Engineering Services Request for Proposal, RFP, as presented. Consulting services not to exceed a total of 40 hours, commencing on September 3rd, 2021, at a rate of $125 per hour.
So moved.
Who was that?
Second.
Omar seconded. On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. We'll now move into instructional personnel. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the request for an unpaid leave of absence submitted by Andrea Whalen, teacher, Croton-Harmon High School, effective September 29, 2021, with an anticipated return date of January 20, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. We'll now move into donations. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $200 from Eric Kohler and New York Life as a contribution to the Carrie E. Tompkins Elementary School General Fund.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $5,094 from the Croton-Harmon Booster Club to pay for the cost of renting light towers for the Croton-Harmon High School homecoming during the week of September 20th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Would like to take a moment to just thank our donors. We are always so grateful for the members of our community and the donors that provide funds to support our school district. So thank you very, very much. We'll now move into the consent agenda. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves all items under the consent agenda.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. And now we will move into the closing of the meeting. So this is the time for our second hearing of the public. As earlier, we do not have anyone in attendance with us. Just to remind our community that we do have hearings of the public at both the beginning and toward the end, at the closing of the meeting as well. So any issues, topics related to the school district that you would like to bring to the board, we would very much like to hear from you. So with that, we will now move into board reports, and we will have a report from board development first.
Okay, so just really quickly, I want to just remind everyone to take a moment, start jotting down your notes on your reflections on the retreat we've had to see whether or not, in order to provide some feedback that we'll discuss when we have our next retreat, which will be maybe sometime in November, December, or January. And our hope is that our student trustee will be with us then, and we'll be able to take advantage of that as well.
Thank you very much, Iris. Communications.
The Communications Committee met on August 27th. We recapped the current stats for communications, the summer issue of Reflections, which has gone to print. One of the items that was discussed was some difficulty that we had with the mailing of the Code of Conduct acknowledgements, and some issues with the Postal Service, and that's being dealt with. We already talked about the special edition of Croton Connections that was in Sarah's President's Report. The World Cafe, which is coming up, is going to be continuing the equity conversation on the 9th of September. And that includes part of the communication that is in the Croton Connections. And then we also discussed some of the other communications that are going on out there about back to school, There was some discussion of the replacement of our cable TV server, which is at end of life, which we'll be following up on farther. And I believe there's going to be some report coming to us about that from administration. And what else do we have? And we discussed what our meeting schedule will be for communication committee meetings for the rest of the year. And I thank Tracy for getting those in the calendar. And that is the sum total of my communications report, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much. So policy committee, I know you spoke about the 2 policies tonight. Do you have anything else to update us on?
No, but I'll do advocacy. Because I can report on that. Although I don't think we haven't really met to say who's going to be in charge, but since I'm working on this thing, I might as well deal with it. The NISBA business meeting is on Monday, October 18th. It's virtual from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And so the question, I guess, is really a sense or a thumbs up and thumbs down from the board. We are supposed to designate who is going to be the representative of the board at NISBA at this business meeting, which I will do unless somebody else wants to do it. You're none. Okay, so you can put that in a minute so we have it for your purposes. Because I think the district clerk is the one who has to inform NISBA. So Tracy, you'll take care of that. The other thing about the business meeting is that we have placed 2 resolutions on the for consideration, both of which were approved by the resolution committee or supported by the resolution committee.
Congratulations.
The first relates to the open meetings law and changes that we want to see in the open meetings law. Point of information that some of you may have seen, but for the public, the state legislature yesterday adopted part of the chapter 475 of the laws of 2021, saying that public bodies may go back to having virtual meetings as we did when the governor's executive order was in place between now and January 2022. So we can, either by committee, and committees and the board itself can, by following those same protocols about having notice, having it live stream, having people be able to watch and have it recorded and played back later, we can meet remotely between now and January 2022, January 15th. That does not address any of the other changes in the open meetings law that we had suggested and that we are asking NISBA to adopt a resolution to advocate on those parts. That resolution that deals with the open meetings law is co-sponsored, even though we wrote it, by ourselves and the Albany City School Board, because the Albany City School Board had a similar thought, and so in his staff in the advocacy area said, would you be okay if Albany wanted to, put their name on it as well? And, we said sure, and so they have. We will see what happens. The other thing, and this is really also for next board meeting, is that last week we received the resolution and amendments kit that, I don't know if everybody received it, but that sets forth all of the resolutions, those that are recommended and those that are not. And presuming if we're going to follow our practice as we've done in previous years, the advocacy committee will have to convene, will convene, we'll go through it, and we'll report at the October meeting on our recommendations as to whether we should, how we should vote, or you would direct me to vote on each of those resolutions. Because this is going to be a virtual meeting, what they have said is you cannot make amendments on the floor. If you have amendments that you want to get into the final book, they have to be in by September 17th at 5 p.m. If you want to make them later, as if you were going to make them from the floor, they have to be submitted by, I think, the Thursday before. So we will have time at the October meeting to be able to say, yeah, on that one, we think would be, we'd approve it if this amendment was adopted. Why don't we propose it? But that's more last minute thing.
Can I just ask, will advocacy do, as you have as the committee has done in the past, where you will go through and you'll give a recommended slate, and we will only discuss at the meeting anything that you need further direction on, as opposed to going through all 27?
If that is the board's pleasure, that is what we will do.
That would be my pleasure.
That would be my pleasure.
Okay.
I don't know anyone else.
So
I do like to read through.
No, we read through that and we
and
can
forward
always
our thoughts
forward
to
our
the
thoughts.
advocacy.
you can absolutely forward your thoughts if you have any thoughts that you want. But I'm just going to say the other members of the advocacy committee, which is Anna and Omar, have not been through this process before, and I don't want to be the one who's saying this is how we do it if there's a different feeling that they have. But in general, and I think I've explained before, earlier today, is that rather than us saying, this is number one, what do you think? This is number two, what do you think? In this room, we will, unless people want otherwise, we'll just say, we think these ones are significant, let's talk about these, and otherwise, unless you got anything else, just let us go forward.
So can you just let us all know when you will be meeting? So if there are ones we want you to take a closer look at, we can get them to you in time, and you'll make sure we get them before the meeting so we can. Thank you.
Alright, I just have one comment on that. I was just thinking it's great to have the virtual meetings option, but I just personally would want to advocate that unless there's extraordinary circumstances, that it's best that we try to still meet in person, especially for these board meetings. The same way that students do better in class in person. I get personally a lot out of being in person. Am I reading it wrong?
Yeah, the resolution I don't think calls for meetings to go switch over to virtual.
No, it gives you the option.
It's better
But-
flexibility,
but-
so that if someone needs to, if someone is traveling and
Yes.
wants to, and has to join virtually, we don't need to notice multiple locations and have them be in a public setting, and all of the other things that we would need to be able to tick off. For that, it's just providing a little bit more flexibility. I think that we haven't, and this is obviously our time to talk as a board, but I don't think that given the change, the commissioner's decision, is that what it's called? From yesterday?
No,
legislative. So that we would be necessarily shifting to be doing all virtual meetings again. I don't think that it's providing flexibility for this.
The one thing I would add, though, and it deals with issues of flexibility, is that part of the resolution that we are presenting to committee for consideration for lobbying is that with regard to committees, that committees should be permitted to meet virtually because that can be more effective than having to meet in person, particularly if we have to coordinate with administrators.
Sure.
And so it may be that with this authority, a particular committee may say, you know what, let's do a Zoom meeting rather than have to meet in person, because we have the authority to do that, and we can get administrators on the line when they may not necessarily be, able to join us, etc. So that's the flexibility, which may not be in person. certainly I would agree with Mary that with regard to our business and our work sessions, unless, the world goes to hell in a handbasket, we should be together here.
Okay, great. And if we have people dialing in, will we be putting them up? Like, we won't all have to go back on our computers, right? Because
So,
it's also
yeah,
nice to look at people and
we'll continue to
try
work
to-
with Greg on that, but we thought we'll explore using the owl that's sitting in front of me. That's why I keep pointing to it. But yeah, we'll look to explore those things. But there are there are times, right, where if we have presentations or work sessions that if we can extend the ability for for building leaders and things to be able to join us remotely rather than being here in person, I do think that we've seen that those things work. So I'd like to be able to explore, being able to offer that.
yeah, as long as the more eye contact we can have,
Yeah,
I think the better. And also, is that January 2022? Is that because of COVID, or is
That's
that
because that's what the legislature picked.
they just
They said January 15th,
Okay.
2022.
Okay.
And the legislation proposed by the new governor and adopted by the legislature.
So,
Hey.
4 months of time now.
And I do thank the governor for that, because I think that it is useful,
Absolutely.
they need it.
All right, so does that clear up board reports? I think we can then move into polling report. Does anyone have anything for polling? Yeah.
Polling, just to bring the board up to date, we have had discussions in the past about the tax property and payment in lieu of taxes. After our last meeting, in speaking with our council, we made suggestions to revisions to the agreement, the pilot agreement signed between the village, town, and the developer. Those suggestions, I have been advised, have been generally accepted by the village and the town. Those will establish, the main thing is that it will establish a set percentage of the pilot payment, and that percentage will be fixed and will then be in the revised agreement, and then each year it will continue so that we won't have to do a recalculation based on changes in assessed valuation of the various components, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are some other provisions that we asked for to make sure that everybody was protected, including the library, who they left out of this, and we said put them in. Apparently, well, the reason why this was originally adopted by the village is because the developer had to submit last week their proposal to get their grant funding.
Somebody's going to turn off
Just turn off your mic.
So, they had to basically, they had to submit, and we are told, have a revision of this agreement that was adopted by the village on the 16th in order to incorporate those changes. So we've kind of accomplished what it is that we desire to accomplish to make sure that this, that we are partners rather than just supplicants.
Nice job. Yeah, thank you very much for your work. Denise. Anna, so you have any hand raised before?
I did. It was just mentioned at one of our board retreats that, the use of technology during the meetings, of course, is obviously discouraged. I just want to reiterate to the public and to the administration and to my colleagues, that when we're here and we're on our devices, it's because we're looking at electronic documents, or we're checking to see if there was an email exchange or a piece of information that we were given to help us further the discussion right here, but that we are all very present, despite the fact that it may look like we're checking our text messages or TikTok. We are not. We are sitting here working with you. So that was it. Thank you.
And I would add that one of the things we are not doing is communicating between us privately using the electronic devices. All communications when we're in these meetings are between and among us is verbal.
Right. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything to pull? No? So the World Cafe was mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting, and I just wanted to ask that in addition to the World Cafe, that administration consider, in order to be inclusive with multiple ways of listening and to have access to the full and diverse perspectives that exist within our community, that you also consider opening up something similar to like the thought exchange or maybe some other means of communication to welcome community input for people where posting their hopes for and their concerns and additional information publicly on chart paper might not be the best way that they want to submit that feedback. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I hope you'll consider that. And then just to follow up also on the follow-up meeting on the 28th, where the ask is going to be for the board, whether the 5 recommendations align with the Board of Ed's goal on equity. I was pointed to the 2 goal documents, the boards and districts, I guess. And I'm still a little confused as to which piece of that is the specific goal. The board's goal I thought was really internal for the board to learn about the topics, not necessarily the action of the district, but that the district goal might be the one that is more what we're responding to. So I was just wondering either, I didn't know if that was a discussion point now, or if someone could look at those goals and specifically say which things we're going to be needing to see if they align with. Okay, cool. So next up on the agenda is items needed for the next board meeting, but if we could finish polling first.
I wasn't necessarily thinking about the cultural cafe or the equity stakeholder report, but to the extent that the communication is managed regarding the 5 factors, I have, brought up that I have concerns about whether some of those goals are legally, whether it's something the district could legally actually offer as different issues, not as issues, but as different responses to some of the equity work that's been done. So I would hope that those communications would be managed. And by legal, I mean regarding, collaborative contracts and other legal limitations that we have as an employer.
So Anna, if I may, I have just a quick public service announcement I'd like to make with regards to the World Cafe and the presentation that the public will see. It's often our custom that the administrative team will take work that comes out of a committee, such as the steering committee, and really take a look to make sure that before it goes to the board, it has certain alignment. So the administrative team this summer did have a chance to take a look at the presentation that was sent to the board, presented to the board back in June from the equity stakeholder team, and just make sure that there was alignment with our strategic coherence plan, run it past legal counsel to make sure that it meets the muster with all of our legal requirements as a district. And then also, we wanted to also set up the work for success. We took a look at a lot of the long-term goals, the short-term goals. We wanted to make sure that they were feasible to be accomplished when we looked at our school calendar, when we looked at our professional development timeline. So we did actually take the original recommendations and they underwent a revision. So if you look at the website right now, prominent on our website, this is for the sake of the board and for the community, You know, if you really attend to fine details, you will notice that there is a difference between what was presented to the board by the equity stakeholder team and what is there now, and what the World Cafe participants will see. We really think that the integrity of the work is intact, but those revisions, I think, address maybe some of the concerns you're stating, as well as the other ones that I mentioned.
I so appreciate you saying that because, you know, prior to being on the board, I always kind of worried about measuring expectations within the community. So to hear that you know, did that work, to be able to present them with something feasible, that makes me, you know, thank you so much. That's wonderful.
John, is that included in the link that's on the homepage that goes to the administrative summary?
That's correct. That is reflective of the work that I was just speaking of.
Okay.
And could I add, is a similar process going to happen after you receive the feedback from, I know you met with the staff this past week on this, and then with the community, will you be revising these recommendations based on their feedback prior to giving us the final recommendations on the 28th?
The intention right now is to present to you the recommendations and list of goals as will be seen by all of the attendees of the 2 World Cafes, along with their specific feedback for each of the recommendations, so that you'll have the chance to see what they saw, and then basically engage in your own dialogue on, you know, on the feedback that was given.
Mm-hmm. So that we'd be providing feedback to you on that, on those as well.
Yes.
But that when we're being asked to do a thumbs up, thumbs down on that as well, but not on the final recommendations on.
So I believe the ask, you know, is that, you know, as was stated, that we would really like, you know, that kind of thumbs up, thumbs down on whether the broad recommendations are really aligned with your vision for the, you know, the work as set forward by your goals. Mm-hmm. And then with regards to the short-term goals and the long-term goals, we'd be very interested, based on your own thoughts, based on what we're hearing from the community, if you would like to provide the administrative team with any guidance on, you know, on those goals, both short-term and long-term.
Okay. So you don't anticipate those broad categories being influenced by the community feedback or the staff feedback at all?
I think what John is saying is that he's going to provide us with those same, like the administrative summary of those 5 recommendations, mm-hmm. as they've been revised and are on the homepage to staff, to the community of the World Cafe, and to us as a board. Mm-hmm. We will also, as a board, and I feel like I'm veering into our next thing on the agenda, but we will also, as a board, we will be getting the compilation of that feedback from those 2 forums. Mm-hmm. So the staff World Cafe forum and then the community World Cafe. We will be given all of that feedback for us to review and to reflect on and to incorporate into our discussion on September 28th when we discuss those. So we're all going to be discussing those, like the recommendation isn't going to change between now and the 28th.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything for Paul? Iris?
Proponent, yes. Oh, I'm trying myself. I just wanted to know if West Bud has a weekly or is it monthly call-in. We call into a board. They have a meeting with area boards, and you get to talk about issues with other board members. And I didn't know if anyone had an interest in being signed up as the representative from Croton-Harmon in order to join in on these calls. It's a weekly.
It's not weekly.
It's monthly.
It's on the 23rd. It's monthly, and this month it is on the 21st. So since I knew you were going to be away, I actually did register to be in attendance. I usually can't take a full hour and a half, but I'll swing it this time since I knew our West Coast liaison is going to be.
Because I know Andrea used to do it last year, so Neil, are you willing to take that on this year?
I'm willing to take it on, but I would say there's 2 things to that. The discussion is really not so much advocacy related. It's West Bar related, but it's really talking about different issues or things that are going on, and maybe on a particular subject. Or we had a lot of COVID discussion, last year, and certainly if there are other board members, if we don't have to be restricted to one, although we usually are, that other board members, and in the middle of the day, like from 12 noon to 1:30, but if someone else felt that they would like to, kind of join because they would go and, hear and speak and, that
to
would be
Neil's
fine.
point, actually, Westpet sets out, and they say specifically, like, we would like to have a person from each district who can speak on the call and give an update on what our district is doing with regards to whatever the topics are for that town hall. But as many people as you want from your district are more than happy to have to listen in. So you can dial into the call if there just would be one designated speaker.
So I guess September 21st, Sarah will be there, but if the October
Anybody
one
else wants to join?
comes around, or in September, then,
12 to 1:30, and I believe they sent some emails too.
yeah, and it's usually the same, they try to do it the same day of the week, it's found, so.
Yes, I
It's
just
like
wanted
the
to put
Tuesdays.
it out there because it's an awesome opportunity to hear how other districts are managing a particular issue, whatever the topic is, and have dialogue on that level. The next thing I was gonna just, I'm not sure if it was officially stated, I saw it mentioned a couple of times on the agenda, but just that when I was at, when a couple of us were at the athletics meeting this week, they do have a robust homecoming plan for our community. It's one that hasn't happened in a long time, so I just wanted to highlight and spot that for everyone to just keep watching the K-12 alerts. I think it's the week of the 20th. It is the week of September. So it sounds like it's gonna every team will be spotlighted. So I hope the community and our fellow board members can mark on your calendar to see something. Also, that was it.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to pull? Okay then. So now we will move into items needed for the next Board of Education meeting. And I think we covered a lot of this, but as I said, our next Board of Education meeting will be our September 28th work session, in which we will be discussing and reviewing the equity stakeholder recommendations, the feedback that we will have gotten from the Two Worlds Cafe events, and what the administration is looking for is that we have the discussion and we come to some consensus on, do these 5 recommendations align with the board's goals on equity? And so that will be a thumbs up, thumbs down. It is not a resolution, and there are no action items specific to any funding actions at this time. It's really, does the board support the district moving forward with these topics in that they align with the district's and the board's goals. So that is where we are for the next board meeting, and then following that would be our November business. October business meeting. Just skipping right ahead.
Which is October 7th?
It is October 7th.
And I guess I mentioned the policy and advocacy things. I don't know if there's anything else I can think of.
Right. If anyone has anything, that comes up, and we'll have obviously the policy stuff. But
also keep an eye out for an updated Black House schedule.
Yes, thank you very much.
We're still working out some details, but hopefully we get an answer on that soon.
And do we have everyone going back to school?
We don't have everyone yet for back to school night, and I'll follow up with and see where we are on that. So I will follow up with everybody on that with back to school nights. And I think that is all I have for next week. Does anybody have questions on anything? Okay. Well, with that then, I wanted to thank our community who has tuned into our live stream. We will be going into executive session and expect that we will adjourn immediately following. So that will be the end of our live stream for the evening. Recommended action that the Board of Education enters into executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries.